Hey everyone, it's Pastor Tabitha, and I am back here with you this week to talk with you about Easter, right? So this is the time of the year we have these two big church holidays. We have Easter, and we have Christmas, right? So we just celebrated Christmas a few months ago, and how exciting it is to be able to celebrate um, Jesus's birth, right? We know that Jesus has come to earth, and this is the start of a new revival on earth because God is here and God is present, and God starts doing stuff through Jesus's birth, right? But without Jesus's birth, we would have no death and resurrection of Jesus, and without the death and resurrection of Jesus, Jesus's birth would mean nothing. So these two holidays have to go hand in hand. We have to be able to link them and link the excitement with them. Now, we often don't get excited about death. Um, Often death is it's a taboo topic because it brings heartbreak and sorrow and a lot of pain to people. But without this death, like, life would not be able to happen. Before I get too much more into this, let's read the um, resurrection account for the week, and it's John 20 verses 1 through 18. Early on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went into the tomb. It was still dark. Mary saw the large stone had been removed from the tomb. She ran to Simon Peter and the other follower. Mary said, "They have taken our Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other follower started for the tomb. They were both running, but the other follower ran faster than Peter. So the other follower reached to the tomb first. He bent down and looked in and saw the strips of linen cloth lying there, but he did not go in. Then following him came Simon Peter. He went to the tomb and saw the strips of linen lying there. He also saw the cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up and laid in a different place from the strips of linen. The other follower, who had reached the tomb first, also went in. He saw, and he believed. These followers did not yet understand from the scriptures that Jesus must rise from death. Then followers went back home. Then the followers went back home, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And while she was still crying, she bent down, looked in the tomb, and saw two angels dressed in white. They were sitting where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and one at the feet. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" She answered, "They've taken away my Lord. I don't know where they have put him." And when Mary said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know it was Jesus. Jesus asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" Mary thought he was the gardener, so she said to him, "Did you take him away, sir? Tell me where you put him, and I'll go get him." Jesus called her by name. She turned around toward Jesus and in the Jewish language said, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Don't hold me. I have not yet gone to the Father, and yeah. But go back to my brothers and tell them this. I am going back to my Father and to your Father. I am going back to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene then went to the followers and said, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them what Jesus had told her. So here we are in this story. And again, this is such a beautiful, crazy ending because this is an ending like unlike any other story we've had, right? So we've had stories, not just our own stories, like we watch movies, we read books, okay? And we usually know the ending. We can usually figure out this is exactly how this story ends. But Jesus' story isn't a typical story. It's not a story that ends in the way that almost all other stories end. It wasn't predictable, despite the fact. Now, I want us to stop and think about this for a second, right? Leading up to this, how many times did Jesus say, "I'm going to die and I will rise again on 3 days. Destroy this temple and in 3 days I will rebuild it. You don't know what I'm doing, but I will die and I will come back again in 3 days," right? Jesus had been throughout his ministry preparing and telling the disciples that he was going to die and that he would return, and they don't understand what he's doing, but in time they'll get it. in time, they will understand what Jesus is up to. They still didn't get it, even coming up to the point of Jesus's end days. And I'm not going to go into all of the details about it, but I want us to stop and to look at some specific points throughout the story. So on what we call on Maundy Thursday, or the Thursday before all of this happens, Jesus comes in and he sits down with his friends. And when he's sitting down with his friends, these are his friends, right? He knows that this is it for him. That after that night, everything will be different. But he still goes to the dinner. Knowing things are not going to go well, he still goes to the dinner. And he sits down. And he ends up washing his disciples' feet, which is completely out of character because nobody does the dirty jobs, right? Especially not a guest. But Jesus says, I love you enough that I'm going to get down on my knees and I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to wash the dirtiest part of you. And Peter, we know, says, no, don't do that. Like, don't touch my feet, God. You're not worthy of that. And Jesus said, if I don't wash you, you will never be clean. Jesus is saying we have to let him have the dirtiest parts of our life in order for us to be free and to be clean. And right? And then Jesus looks at Judas at one point and says to a friend of his, says to the group, one of you is going to deny me. And then looks at Judas and says, go do what you must do. So going into this dinner, knowing what was going to happen, Jesus knew his friend was going to betray him and sent him to do it anyway. Jesus didn't stop loving Judas even though Judas left him. And then, when it comes to the communion aspect of things, the breaking of the bread, this is such a beautiful moment because he offers and he says, every time you eat this or drink this, remember me. Now, keep in mind that we think of them as such sacred things, and they are. The sacraments are sacred. The bread and the juice, they are sacred for us as Christians, but they're common things, right? So Jesus wasn't just saying, whenever you take communion, remember me. Jesus was saying, whenever you gather together, whenever you have a meal together, whenever you eat this ordinary bread, and whenever you drink this ordinary drink, remember me. Remember my body being broken for you. Remember my blood being poured out for you. And as you participate in these things, think of me, right? And so in churches, we celebrate communion once a week. But the reality is, it's common and it's in unity with others. So every time that we as the church gather, every time that we come together in a meal with others, whether it's just our family or whether it's a whole group of body of believers, whenever we come together and we participate in these meals together, remember what Jesus did for us. That's what he's saying there. And from there, Jesus goes out to the garden and he says, God, I don't want to do this. Please don't make me do this. But if it's your will, I will. And how many times have we had that happen in our own lives? And this is such a beautiful demonstration. Jesus himself did not want to die on that cross, but he does it anyway. When God asks us to do hard things, follow Jesus and do them anyway, even if you don't want to. While he was there, the betrayal came through, right? And Jesus was arrested, and Peter got mad, and Peter cut the ear of a guard off. And what does Jesus do? He looks at Peter and says, no, this is not who I am. And he takes the ear and he puts the ear back on the guard. So not only did Jesus rebuke the ones that he loved in that final moment, but he also healed those that were harming him. Jesus' love is for everyone, and Jesus will correct us when we don't, or when we do something wrong, and he will heal and forgive even those that we don't think deserve it. Then it goes into the beating, right? Jesus was stripped, his clothes were gambled away, he was beaten, mocked, humiliated. People chose to let go a murderer over him. How heartbreaking it is to see that this innocent man is enduring all of this, but he said it must be done because I need the world to know how much I love them, that I will go to suffering, the worst kind of suffering, for their sake, even the sake of those that don't deserve it, for the sake of murderers, of thieves, of sinners. And so he does those things. And then he goes onto the cross, and while he is hanging on the cross, he does something else that's profound. He could have just breathed his last breath and let it be done, but instead, he asked for forgiveness for those that denied him, for those that were choosing to kill him. And how often is that us? We might not be saying specifically, crucify Jesus, but every time that we are not walking with Jesus, every time that we are intentionally living in sin, we're crying, crucify him, saying his life doesn't matter. But yet, on the cross, Jesus is saying, Father, forgive them, because they don't know that they're doing that. And then he looks at the man on his left, the man, or on his right, and this man is genuinely sorry for what he has done. He knows that he doesn't deserve Jesus' love, and how powerful it must have been to see this innocent man who is God hanging next to you, and right there be offered forgiveness and eternal glory with him. We don't determine when forgiveness happens. Only Jesus can determine when forgiveness happens. And it's for everyone. And then it goes into Holy Saturday, and not much happens this day, right? After Jesus is taken down, he's put in a tomb, and we wait. Waiting is hard. Not only did the disciples wait, but they ran and they hid, and they were in hiding while waiting to see if Jesus was going to do what he promised to do. They still didn't understand that Jesus was telling the truth when he said, I will come back to life in 3 days. And so they sat and they waited in fear. And then the third day came, and they went into the tomb to mourn the loss of their friend, but he wasn't there. He was risen. And Peter and John get to go to the tomb, and they see the linen there, and they see the folded up linen, which in that custom, you were done eating when you folded up your linen and you put it on your plate. So by them seeing the folded up linen where his head was, this is his way of saying, what I have come to do is finished. All that I've promised you has been done. And so they knew that this was different, but they still didn't see Jesus until Jesus made himself known to Mary. And once he made himself known to Mary, once Mary understood that she was talking to Jesus, she received an amazing moment where she got to be with Jesus in her brokenness. And he loved her, and he said, go and tell them it is me, I'm alive. And so she ran off in this celebration. And so here we are on Easter. We're celebrating not just this man, right? It's not just a birthday party or a celebration of life. We are celebrating the fact that Jesus came to forgive all humanity for all of their sin. Jesus came to heal and to restore, to mend, to offer love, to offer mercy to all humans, both those that were living when he was here and those that will live in the future. Jesus came to offer a living hope that nobody else could. And so today on Easter, we celebrate Jesus' resurrection. Because without his resurrection, there is no promise of a future for us outside of, or after we die. But because of God's love for us, because we believe that God loves us and that we know that he has redeemed us, and we know that everything that he does comes from the depths of his love for us, we have the opportunity to be with him in eternal glory forever, because he has the victory to overcome the death and the sin of this world. Thank you guys, and I will see you next week.